Okay, so we're diving into Atlas Shrugged, right?
Yeah.
And this book, let me tell you, it's not for the faint of heart.
No, it's not. It's a lot to process.
You've given us, like, excerpts, railroads, geniuses vanishing.
Mhm.
We've got a lot to cover. So our mission, if we choose to accept it, is to make sense of this whole thing.
It's like, what is Rand trying to tell us, you know?
Exactly.
One thing that grabs you right away is how she just throws you into the deep end. This world, it's on the edge of collapse. Industries are falling apart. It's like she took everything that makes us anxious today and cranked it up to 11.
Yeah, like, what if it all goes wrong?
Yeah.
And then she shows you exactly what that looks like.
Yeah. And that's where Taggart Transcontinental comes in. This huge, once powerful railroad. Now it's sputtering like a train running out of steam.
And the guy at the helm, James Taggart, he's supposed to be the captain steering the ship, but
He's more interested in playing politics than actually doing his job.
it's all about appearances with him, right? Keeping up the facade, even as everything's falling apart behind the scenes.
He's a prime example of what Rand calls a moocher. Someone who'd rather ride on the backs of others than, actually create something of value.
And then there's Dagny, his sister.
Ah.
Talk about a force of nature.
Oh, yeah, Dagny. She is something else.
She's the only one who seems to understand how to keep that railroad, running.
She's brilliant, she's driven, and she does not suffer fools gladly, which is probably why she clashes so much with her brother and his cronies. They're all about preserving their own power, even if it means sacrificing the actual work.
And that's where we meet Hank Rearden, right? The steel magnate, the guy who invented Rearden Metal. I mean, talk about innovation. This guy created a new kind of steel, stronger and lighter than anything else out there.
He's the embodiment of what Rand admires.
Yeah.
Self-made, driven by logic, and completely unapologetic about his success.
And he's got this amazing story, right? About the bracelet.
Oh yeah, the bracelet.
Yeah.
He spends 10 years crafting this bracelet out of his own metal. For himself, not to sell it, not for fame, but just for the pure satisfaction of creation.
It's like, this guy gets it. He understands the drive to create, to build something amazing, even if it's just for yourself.
And that's where you start to see Rand's philosophy of objectivism really shining through. It's about celebrating reason, individual achievement, and a hands-off approach to the economy.
Like, let people create, let them build their own success and get out of the way.
Exactly. Characters like Rearden and Dagny, they represent that spirit. They don't apologize for their accomplishments, they earned them.
But the world they live in, it seems like it almost punishes success, doesn't it? Like, the more you achieve, the more you become a target.
It's like they're trying to drag everyone down to the lowest common denominator, instead of encouraging people to reach their full potential. And that's where Francisco d'Anconia comes in, and he really throws a wrench in the works.
Oh yeah, Francisco. Dagny's old flame, heir to a copper fortune, brilliant, charming, and seemingly determined to destroy everything he touches.
Yeah, he is a bit of an enigma.
He's like, I inherited this copper empire and I'm going to run it into the ground. It's
Yeah.
like, why would you do that?
Well, remember that scene where he's talking about his family's copper company, how it survived for centuries? He says it would take a special kind of person to destroy it. It's almost as if he's dropping a clue, like he's playing some deeper game.
Okay, now that is interesting. So it's not just bad business, it's like intentional.
Maybe. Or maybe he's trying to prove a point. But what point? That's the big question.
Okay, now I'm really hooked. So we've got this world on the brink, these powerful characters, all these secrets and motivations swirling around. It's intense.
And this is just the beginning.
And then there's this whole mystery, right? This John Galt guy. Who is John Galt? Everyone's asking it.
It's like this ghost hanging over everything, but it's more than just a question, It's a symptom. Like this society is sick and it's forgetting how to even ask the important questions.
And these brilliant minds, these inventors, they're disappearing. It's like the creativity itself is being, like, snuffed out.
Like a candle in the wind, and everyone's afraid to talk about it, but you can feel the tension.
Right. And Dagny, she's in the thick of it, trying to find this vital piece of technology. But everywhere she turns, it's like dead ends, abandoned factories, people whispering about John Galt, but never giving you a straight answer.
She meets that retired inventor, right, the one who refuses to share his genius with the world. That scene always gets me.
It's heartbreaking. He's got all this talent, and he's just letting it go to waste.
Well, you could see it as waste, or you could see it as a form of protest. Like he's saying, if this is how the world's going to be, if they're going to punish achievement, then fine, let them have it. Let them choke on their own mediocrity.
It's like he's cutting off his nose to spite his face, though. I mean, doesn't that hurt him more than it hurts the people who are, supposedly oppressing him?
Maybe. But it's also a powerful statement, a refusal to be complicit. And you see in that same struggle in Dagny too, don't you? She's trying to save her railroad, but the more successful she is, the more she becomes a target.
Because she's a threat to the system. She's showing them what's possible, and they can't stand it.
Right. She's not asking for permission. She's not waiting for handouts. She's just getting things done. And that terrifies people like her brother James.
And then there's that scene with the San Sebastian line. I mean, talk about a gutsy move.
She dismantles the whole thing rather than let it fall into the wrong hands.
It's like she'd rather destroy something beautiful than let it be used for the wrong reasons.
And it speaks to a core tenet of objectivism, doesn't it? That true value comes from creation, not from control or possession.
And Hank Rearden, he's going through the same thing, right? The government breathing down his neck, trying to take his invention.
That scene where he's forced to sign over the rights to his own metal, it's like watching a robbery in slow motion.
It's brutal. But he has that one line that just gives me chills every time.
I will not help you make it look like a sale. So powerful.
He knows he's being robbed blind, but he refuses to play along. He won't let them pretend it's anything other than what it is.
And it's interesting how Francisco challenges Rearden's perspective in that moment, right? Rearden's angry, ready to give up, but Francisco reminds him that there's something deeper at stake.
It's not just about the money, it's about integrity. About staying true to your principles, even when it hurts.
Exactly. It's about having a moral compass and sticking to it, even in the face of overwhelming pressure.
And that's what makes Rearden such a compelling character. He's not perfect, he makes mistakes, but he ultimately chooses to do what he believes is right.
And that scene at the mills where Francisco lays it all out for him, the looters, the moochers, the parasites who feed off the creators, it's like a light bulb goes off for Rearden.
He realizes he's been fighting this battle his whole life, even if he didn't realize it. He's been carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders, and it's only now that he understands why.
And it makes you think, doesn't it? About the systems we create, the policies we support. Are we rewarding the right people? Or are we unintentionally propping up the moochers and the looters while punishing the very people who make progress possible?
It's a tough question, and it's one that I think everyone needs to grapple with. But back to Dagny, her escape is a whole other level of intense.
She's betrayed, her heart's broken, and she literally flies off into a storm, risking everything on a rumor, a whisper about this hidden valley where John Galt might be.
Talk about a leap of faith.
It's a powerful metaphor for that moment when you decide you can't take it anymore, when you have to break free, even if it means leaving everything behind.
And what she finds in that valley, well, it's not what she expects. It's this whole other society, hidden away from the chaos of the outside world.
A society built on the principles of reason, individualism, and free trade, where the best and brightest are free to create, to innovate, to thrive, without interference from the government or the looters.
It's like she stepped into a parallel universe, and it's both exhilarating and terrifying.
Yeah.
So Dagny finds herself in this hidden valley, right? This sanctuary for what Rand calls the men of the mind.
Yeah, it's like she walked into a utopia. But not a utopia built on wishful thinking, you know. It's built on the idea that individual achievement, when it's allowed to flourish, can actually create a better world for everyone.
And it's not just talk, right? They actually live by these principles, like that scene with Midas Mulligan, the financier.
Oh, yeah. Midas Mulligan,
Yeah.
He operates on a whole other level.
He explains how he basically reimbursed Rearden for the metal that was stolen from him. And he says it so simply like value for value. But it's more than just a transaction, isn't it?
It's about justice. It's about recognizing that when someone creates something of value, they deserve to be rewarded for it. Not punished, not exploited.
Which is a pretty radical idea in today's world, right? I mean, we're constantly bombarded with messages about income inequality, the need for redistribution.
But Rand would say those are just symptoms of a deeper problem, that the real injustice is a system that prevents people from reaching their full potential in the first place.
So instead of trying to redistribute the wealth, she'd say, let's create more wealth. Let's unleash the power of individual creativity and see what happens.
Exactly. It's about creating a system that rewards hard work, innovation, and taking risks. It's about getting out of the way and letting people build something amazing.
And that's what's so fascinating about Galt's. It's like this thought experiment come to life. What happens when you create a society based on those principles?
Well, it's not without its challenges, of course, but you see the power of that freedom, that sense of purpose that comes from knowing that your work is valued, that you're contributing to something bigger than yourself.
But then there's the flip side, right?
Yeah.
What happens to the world outside of Galt's Gulch? What happens when all the creators, the innovators, the atlases, as Rand calls them, decide to shrug?
Well, she shows us, doesn't she? The world outside is falling apart. The lights are literally going out because they've lost the very people who kept the lights on, who kept the trains running, who built the world they take for granted.
It's a bleak picture, but it's also a warning.
A wake-up call. And maybe, just maybe, a glimmer of hope. Because it's a reminder that we have a choice.
We can continue down the path of mediocrity, of envy, of punishing success, or we can choose a different path, a path that celebrates individual achievement and recognizes that a rising tide really can lift all boats.
And that's the power of Atlas Shrugged, isn't it? It's not just a story, it's a challenge. It asks us to look in the mirror and ask ourselves, what do we value? What kind of world do we want to live in?
It's a book that stays with you long after you finish the last page. And I have a feeling we're going to be wrestling with these questions for a long time to come. So, to our listeners, if you're up for a challenge, if you're ready to have your worldview shaken up a bit, I highly recommend diving into Atlas Shrugged. Just be prepared for a wild ride.